Cold open. Maximum impact. 30 seconds to hook the audience. Three shapes moved through the Afghan sandstorm like ghosts. Taliban fighters, PKM machine guns, taking position above a valley where six Navy SEALs walked toward death. 1,340 meters away, Staff Sergeant Quinn Aldridge watched them through a spotting scope older than her father. Korean War vintage. Chosen reservoir 1951. Her grandfather's glass. Every electronic system on forward operating base Chapman had failed. Thermal cameras showed white static. Laser rangefinders blinked error codes. Multi-million-dollar drones were blind. But through 72-year-old optics, Quinn could see everything. She settled behind her rifle, did the mathematics in her head. No computer, no calculator. Just training and instinct passed down through two generations of warriors. The first Taliban fighter settled behind his machine gun. Below him, Master Chief Brennan Sutherland led his team into the kill zone. 30 seconds until the ambush triggered. Quinn's finger found the trigger. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. Best shot is the one nobody expected you to take. She exhaled half a breath. The world narrowed to crosshairs and target, and squeezed. 42 hours earlier, forward operating base Chapman sat in Afghanistan's coast province like a scar on ancient stone. Concrete barriers, razor wire, guard towers bristling with cameras that saw the world in green-tinted pixels. 200 American souls living in a bubble of technology surrounded by mountains that had watched empires rise and fall for 3,000 years. The base hummed with electronics, generators, server cooling fans, the digital heartbeat of modern warfare. Everything connected, everything monitored, everything dependent on power flowing through circuits and silicon chips. Quinn Aldridge hated it, not the mission, not the work. She was exceptional at intelligence analysis, pattern recognition, terrain evaluation, predicting enemy movement before it happened. But the distance bothered her, the abstraction. Fighting wars through computer screens felt like trying to hold water in your hands. Her grandfather would have called it dangerous. The relying, the surrendering of human judgment to algorithms that didn't bleed when they were wrong. In the climate-controlled operations center, Quinn sat before 6 glowing monitors. Satellite feeds, thermal imagery, communications intercepts, data streams that supposedly told her everything about the battlefield. But data wasn't wisdom. Information wasn't instinct. On her desk beside the keyboard sat an object that drew stares from everyone who saw it. A spotting scope in a cracked leather case. M1C vintage. The brass nameplate read MSGT Aldridge USMC 1951, Master Sergeant Thaddeus Tack Aldridge, her grandfather, Marine Scout sniper, chosen reservoir. 73 confirmed kills in temperatures that froze diesel fuel solid. He'd carried this scope through the worst winter battle in American military history. Used it to keep 43 Marines alive when every radio froze and every battery died, and technology became useless metal and plastic. Quinn reached out and touched the leather case, still warm from the Afghan sun. The glass inside was scratched but flawless. Tack had maintained it obsessively for 60 years, passed it to her 3 months before he died. Said 6 words: when everything fails, this still works. She wondered what he'd think of this place. This fortress of screens and sensors where soldiers trusted machines more than their eyes. She knew exactly what he'd think. He'd told her often enough on the Montana ranch where he'd taught her to shoot. Quinny, your generation worships technology, thinks it makes you invincible. But I've seen what happens when the batteries die. Seen men freeze to death staring at equipment that stopped working. Technology fails. Training doesn't. Remember that. She remembered. Aldridge, are you listening? Quinn turned. Sergeant First Class Devin Blake stood in the doorway holding a tablet. 24 years old, digital native, completely comfortable in this world of screens and data streams. Got tomorrow's terrain analysis. Looks clean. Drones show no thermal signatures in the target area. Satellite confirms structures are cold. We're good to go. Quinn pulled up the same satellite imagery on her monitor. Studied the target compound nestled in a bowl of limestone ridges. Natural choke points on every approach. Dawn insertion time, which meant temperature inversions. Atmospheric layering. The kind of conditions that turn sophisticated sensors into expensive paperweights. What about atmospheric effects, she asked. Temperature differential at dawn creates severe mirage. Thermal imaging washes out. Blake shrugged. We've got redundancy. Multiple sensor platforms. If one system has issues, others compensate. And if they all have issues simultaneously, then we adapt. Look, Quinn, I respect the old school approach, but we're not fighting with bolt-action rifles anymore. Technology exists for a reason. He left before she could explain that technology existing and technology working were different things, especially when physics decided to remind everyone who was really in charge. Quinn stared at the satellite image. She'd seen this scenario before, not in Afghanistan, in her grandfather's field notebooks from Korea. She pulled the small leather journal from her cargo pocket. Tax handwriting, faded pencil on yellowed pages, mathematical formulas, terrain sketches, wind calculations for conditions that would shut down any modern optic. The accumulated wisdom of a man who'd survived impossible odds by trusting fundamentals over convenience. She found the entry she was looking for. December 1951, chosen reservoir temperature -38. Every battery dead, radios frozen solid. Chinese coming in waves. Lieutenant wants to withdraw. I tell him we hold. Not because we're brave, because falling back blind in this cold means we all die. So we hold, and we shoot. Manual calculations, Kentucky windage. The fundamentals, 72 hours without sleep, 16 kills. We hold because we remember what technology made us forget. When equipment fails, warriors don't. Train like batteries don't exist. Quinn closed the journal. Outside, she could hear the SEAL team preparing for tomorrow's mission. Loud voices, confident laughter, the sound of men who'd never experienced catastrophic system failure in combat. She wondered if they even knew how to function without their electronics. The mission briefing was scheduled for 1900 hours. Quinn gathered her materials and walked across the compound as the sun descended toward the mountains. September in Afghanistan meant brutal days and cold nights. The kind of temperature swings that played hell with precision equipment. The briefing room was packed. 24 Navy SEALs from Naval Special Warfare Development Group, support personnel, command staff, the air thick with confidence and the smell of gun oil and ambition. Commander Whitaker Thornton stood at the front, 54 years old, Gulf War veteran, 3 combat deployments, the kind of officer who'd earned respect through competence, not politics. His uniform was crisp, his bearing professional. His eyes carried the weight of decisions made in bad places. Quinn respected him, but she also knew he carried scars from Desert Storm that had never quite healed, scars that made him trust technology more than he should. Gentlemen, Thornton glanced at Quinn and the 2 other women present. And ladies, we have a high-value target, Taliban Commander Rashid Wardak. Intelligence has tracked him to this compound complex 17 kilometers northeast of our position. The map appeared on the screen. Quinn's earlier analysis had been correct. Natural kill box if someone knew where to look. Perfect ambush terrain. Wardak is planning a major operation against Bagram Air Base. We take him off the board, we prevent significant friendly casualties. The operation is straightforward. Fast insertion at dawn. Overwatch team positions here. He pointed to the eastern ridge. Assault element approaches from the south. Drone surveillance provides real-time coverage. We're in and out before the Taliban knows we were there. Master Chief Brennan Sutherland stood, 47 years old, 23 years in the teams. The kind of operator who'd forgotten more about combat than most soldiers would ever learn. His presence filled the room without effort. Weather conditions, he asked. Clear skies, light wind, optimal for all sensor platforms. Quinn's hand went up. Thornton nodded to her. Sir, the optimal conditions might be our biggest vulnerability. The room shifted. 26 sets of eyes turned toward her. Not all friendly, not all willing to listen. Explain, Staff Sergeant. Quinn stood and moved to the map. Professional, confident, knowing every word would be weighed and probably dismissed. The target sits in a natural bowl. At dawn, cold air settles in the valley while the ridgeline warms, creates extreme thermal inversion. Temperature differential of 30 degrees or more. That inversion layer will blind thermal optics. Mirage will be severe. Laser rangefinders will give false readings because the atmospheric density keeps changing. Every electronic sensor we have will struggle or fail. Thornton's expression remained neutral. We're aware of atmospheric challenges. That's why we have multiple redundant systems. Sir, with respect, multiple systems affected by the same atmospheric conditions equals multiple failures. I recommend repositioning Overwatch to the northern ridge. Higher elevation, different observation angle, and we need personnel trained in manual range estimation as primary, not backup. Silence. Then someone laughed. One of the younger SEALs. Quinn didn't catch which one. Manual range estimation, what is this, Korea? More laughter rippled through the room. Thornton raised his hand for quiet, but something had hardened in his eyes. Something that told Quinn this conversation was already over. Staff Sergeant Aldridge, I appreciate your thoroughness and analysis. That's why you're here, but we're not going to plan a mission around the assumption that billions of dollars in equipment will fail simultaneously. The Eastern Ridge provides optimal fields of fire in proximity to the exfiltration route. That's where Overwatch goes. We trust our systems because they work. Quinn felt the familiar exhaustion settling on her shoulders, the weight of constantly being dismissed. Not because her analysis was wrong, she knew it wasn't wrong, but because questioning the technology questioned the entire foundation of modern military operations. She thought of TAC, of the 72 hours he'd held a frozen ridgeline with nothing but iron sights and mathematics, while better-equipped units withdrew around him. Sir, I've analyzed over 200 operations in terrain matching these exact conditions. The failure pattern is consistent when we over-rely on Staff Sergeant. Thornton's voice carried an edge now. I know about your grandfather, Master Sergeant Thaddeus Aldridge. Chosen reservoir. 73 confirmed kills. The legend. I've read his after-action reports. Remarkable achievement for 1951. But this is 2023. The Korean War was fought with bolt-action rifles and manual calculations because that's all they had. We have better tools now. We use them. He turned back to the map. Dismissal complete. The plan stands. Eastern Ridge Overwatch. Dawn insertion. Any other questions? Quinn sat down, her face neutral, her mind calculating how badly this was going to fail. Across the room, she caught Master Chief Sutherland watching her with an unreadable expression. Beside him, another operator met her eyes. Gunnery Sergeant Callahan McReady, 59 years old, one of the old breed who'd come up through Beirut in Panama before everything became about technology. McReady gave her the slightest nod. It said, you're right, but this isn't your fight to win in a briefing room. The briefing continued. Weapons loadout, communications protocols, contingency plans that all assumed the technology would work as advertised. Professional, thorough, completely unprepared for Murphy's Law in an environment where physics didn't care about confidence. After the briefing, Quinn walked back to her quarters through gathering darkness. The base transformed at night. Lights from guard towers. Generator hum. The smell of diesel fuel and dust, and something ancient in the air that reminded everyone this land had been here long before America existed and would be here long after. She sat on her rack and pulled out TAC's journal again. Flipped through pages of calculations and observations, drawings of shooting positions, weather notes, the diary of a man who'd learned to survive by trusting only what he could see, calculate, and control. On the last page, dated 2 weeks before he died of heart failure at age 89, TAC had written a final entry. Quinn had read it 100 times. Tonight, with tomorrow's mission looming and the certainty of equipment failure ahead, the words hit differently, Quinn. Rating this means I'm gone. Should have said these things to your face, but feelings weren't my strong suit. Facts were. You're the best natural shooter I ever trained. Better than men I served with in Korea. Better than most instructors I had. But being good won't be enough. You're a woman in a man's profession. They'll doubt you, dismiss you, wait for you to fail so they can say they were right all along. Don't let them make you doubt yourself. Trust your training, trust your eyes. When the moment comes, and it will come, when all their fancy equipment fails and they're standing there blind, you step up. You make the shot, you save your brothers. That's what we do. Not for glory, not to prove points, because it needs doing. At Chosin, we had 10 days of ammunition for 30 days of fighting. Technology failed. Training didn't. Remember, the rifle changes, the math doesn't. The gear improves, the warrior's heart stays the same. Make them remember what we did. Not for glory, so they survive. Make me proud, Quinny. You always do. Tack Quinn closed the journal. Her eyes burned, but she didn't cry. Crying didn't save lives. Planning did. She stood and walked to her footlocker. From the bottom beneath spare uniforms and boots, she pulled out a rifle case. Opened it. Inside was her issued M24 sniper rifle. She'd qualified expert on every weapon system the Army offered. Perfect scores on paper. But paper didn't matter when officers looked at her and saw a desk jockey who should stay behind a computer. She checked the rifle's condition. Clean, well-maintained. The scope's electronic ballistic calculator blinked ready, but Quinn didn't trust it. Too many failure points. Batteries, circuit boards, software that worked in the lab but failed in the field. She pulled out her own range book, 6 years of accumulated data. One calculations, atmospheric compensation formulas, manual range estimation techniques. Everything TAC had taught her adapted to modern ammunition and platforms. She opened to a fresh page and began doing mathematics for tomorrow's mission. Range to target approximately 1,300 meters. Wind speed at dawn likely 15 to 20 knots from the northwest. Temperature differential 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Altitude 2,300 meters above sea level. The calculations took 20 minutes. When she finished, she had complete holdover and windage solutions for every distance increment from 800 to 1,500 meters. All manual and all memorizable and all available if every electronic system failed, which they would. She memorized the numbers, then burned the page. No evidence of planning and unauthorized action. A knock interrupted her thoughts. She opened the door to find Callahan McReady standing there looking uncomfortable in the way senior NCOs did when about to bend rules. "Can I come in, Staff Sergeant?" Quinn stepped aside. McCready entered and glanced at the rifle case on her rack. "You're thinking about doing something that'll end your career," he said. Statement, not question. "I'm thinking about doing my job. Your job is intelligence analysis, not direct action. My job is making sure those men come home alive. Sometimes that requires direct action." McCready sighed. He pulled something from his pocket, a small notebook older than TAC's journal. The leather cover was nearly black with age and oil from decades of handling. "Your grandfather gave me this in 1985, Beirut. I was a young scout sniper instructor at the time. Thought I knew everything about shooting. TAC was there doing liaison work with Lebanese forces. Old man by then pushing 55. I made some smart comment about Korean war relics who should have retired." He smiled at the memory. "TAC took me to a range, handed me a rifle with iron sights only, told me to hit a target at 800 meters. Wind was tricky, mirage was bad, and I was used to having a spotter do all the calculations. I missed 4 times in a row." McCready opened the old notebook, pages filled with TAC's handwriting. Then TAC lay down behind the same rifle, same conditions. He looked through that scope for maybe 10 seconds, made one tiny adjustment, squeezed the trigger. Center mass hit, 800 meters, first round. No spotter, no calculator, just eyes and mathematics and 50 years of fundamentals. He handed the notebook to Quinn. "He gave me this afterwards. Said Callahan technology will make you lazy if you let it. Keep these notes. Someday, when everything fails, they might save your life or someone else's. I've carried it for 38 years, never needed it, until maybe tomorrow." Quinn opened the notebook, page after page of TAC's techniques, range estimation methods, wind reading, atmospheric compensation tables, mathematical formulas for calculating bullet drop without computers. "Why give this to me? Because tomorrow morning, every system Commander Thornton is counting on will fail. The thermals will white out, the lasers will error out, the drones will be useless, and 6 men will walk into an ambush they can't see because their equipment can't see it. You know this for certain. I know atmospheric science, I know over-reliance on technology, and I know Tack Aldrich. If his granddaughter says there's a problem, there's a problem." McCready moved toward the door, then paused. "I can't officially condone what you're thinking, but I can tell you facts. The Northern Ridge has a goat trail, accessible from the southern perimeter. Old Soviet maps show it. Current satellite imagery doesn't because of brush cover." Quinn met his eyes. You're telling me how to go unauthorized. I'm telling you what Tack did at Chosin. He left his assigned position, took a different vantage point, and saved 43 Marines because he saw what the officers with their frozen equipment couldn't see. McCready's expression hardened. They recommended him for the Navy Cross. Commander Thornton's father denied it, said it set a bad precedent to reward insubordination. Tack carried that denial for 50 years, died without the medal he earned. The words hit Quinn like a physical blow. Thornton's father, Lieutenant Commander Adrian Thornton, task force commander in Korea, by-the-book officer who valued procedure over results. Whitaker probably doesn't even know his father made that call, but I do. I was there when Tack got the denial letter, watched it break something in him. McCready opened the door. Do what you think is right, Quinn, not what's authorized. What's right, Tack did. Cost him a medal but saved 43 lives. You decide what matters more. He left. Quinn stood holding two notebooks that represented 70 years of sniper wisdom, knowledge that no computer could replicate, the feel of wind, the patience for a perfect trigger squeeze, the moral weight of taking life to preserve life. She sat and studied Tack's Korean War notes, not the tactics, the philosophy, the mindset that kept him alive when everything froze and everyone else gave up. One entry stood out, Chosen Day 3. Men asking why we don't retreat. We're surrounded. I tell them surrounded means target-rich environment. No such thing as a bad shooting position when enemies are everywhere. We adapt. We endure. We win. Not with equipment, with will. Quinn made her decision. At 03:45 hours, Staff Sergeant Quinn Aldridge slipped out of her quarters in full combat gear. M24 rifle slung across her back. Tack's spotting scope hanging from her belt. Ruck containing ammunition water in both notebooks. 60 pounds of gear. She'd carried more in Ranger training. The base was quiet. Guards watched outward, not inward. She moved through shadows using the cover and concealment Tack had taught her. Not rushing, steady, purposeful, moving like someone who belonged exactly where they were. She reached the southern perimeter fence, found the spot McCready had described, cut through the wire with bolt cutters from the engineer supply shed, replaced the section carefully. To casual observation, the fence remained intact. She slipped through into Afghan darkness. The night was cold and crystalline. Stars like shattered diamonds across black velvet. The kind of night Tack had described from Korea. Beautiful and deadly. Quinn oriented by the North Star, not GPS. Electronics failed. Celestial navigation had worked for 10,000 years. The climb took 40 minutes. Steep terrain, loose rock, darkness. Quinn's breathing stayed controlled despite altitude and weight. She trained for this her entire adult life. Every hard school she could get into as a woman determined to prove she belonged. But tonight wasn't about proving anything. It was about preventing disaster. She reached the northern ridge at 05:15 hours, 15 minutes before dawn, found a position with clear view of the target area and the valley approach, set up the rifle on its bipod, mounted Tack's spotting scope to her pack frame for stability. Through the ancient Korean War optics, she glassed the target area. What she saw made her blood run cold. Taliban fighters moving into position. Not 3, 4 positions, PKM machine guns, RPGs. The 4th position had a DSHK heavy machine gun that could shred vehicles. Perfect ambush setup. The angle was invisible from the eastern ridge where the SEAL Overwatch was setting up. Invisible from the valley. Only visible from where Quinn now lay. And invisible to thermal imaging because the limestone caves provided natural thermal masking. Exactly like the tactics Tack had described Chinese forces using in Korea. Old tactics. Proven tactics. That defeated modern sensors because physics didn't care about technology. Quinn keyed her radio. Encrypted command frequency. Any station, this is Cordell. I have eyes on 4 enemy positions overlooking primary approach road. Grid 42 Sierra Whiskey Delta 831264, requesting immediate engagement authorization under imminent threat doctrine. The response was immediate and furious. Cordell, this is Chapman TOC. Identify yourself and location immediately. Commander Thornton's voice. Quinn recognized the barely controlled rage beneath the professional tone. Chapman, this is Staff Sergeant Aldridge. I am positioned on Northern Ridge with observation of targets invisible from primary overwatch position. Assault element is 3 minutes from ambush. Request authorization to engage. The radio exploded. Aldridge, what the hell do you think you're doing? You are not authorized for that position. You are not authorized to engage anything. Return to base immediately. That is a direct order. Through the spotting scope, Quinn watched the SEAL assault team moving through the valley. Master Chief Sutherland on point. 6 men in perfect tactical formation. Good spacing, professional movement. Completely unaware of 4 machine guns positioned above them. The sun touched the eastern ridgeline. First light, the thermal inversion began immediately. Quinn watched the SEAL sniper team on the eastern ridge scramble with their equipment. Their thermal scopes were washing out to white static, exactly as she'd predicted. Chapman, your thermal systems are failing due to atmospheric inversion. Primary overwatch cannot acquire targets. I have clear visual. Assault element is 90 seconds from kill zone. Request immediate authorization to engage. Negative. You are ordered to cease transmission and return to... Quinn switched off the radio. Orders didn't matter anymore. 6 men were about to die if she followed orders. 6 men would live if she violated them. That wasn't a difficult choice. Not for an Aldridge. She took 3 deep breaths, settled behind the rifle. Her eye found the scope. Through the glass, she could see the first Taliban fighter clearly, settling behind his PKM, checking the feed tray, chambering the first round. Range 1,340 meters. Wind 17 knots gusting to 23 from the northwest at 45 degrees. Temperature 48 degrees Fahrenheit. Barometric pressure low. Humidity 8%. Quinn did the mathematics. No computer, no calculator. Pure training. Bullet drop 18.7 milliradians up. Wind deflection 6.2 milliradians left plus additional hold for gusts. Coriolis effect at this latitude 0.4 milliradians right. Spin drift 0.3 milliradians right. Total adjustment 18 up, 6 left. The SEAL team was 100 meters from the kill zone. 30 seconds until the ambush triggered. Quinn's breathing slowed. Her heart rate dropped. She found the natural respiratory pause and held it. The world narrowed. Reticle, target, mathematical certainty. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle recoiled. The suppressor reduced the report to a sharp crack, swallowed by wind and distance. 1,340 meters away, the PKM gunner's head snapped back. He dropped into the cave, dead before he understood what happened. Quinn didn't watch. Already working the bolt. Smooth, mechanical, chambering the second round. The assistant gunner was moving toward the weapon, trying to take over. She acquired him through the scope, adjusted for the slight wind shift. Squeezed. 2.1 seconds of flight time. The bullet arrived before he reached the gun. Center mass. He collapsed. The third Taliban fighter broke from deeper in the cave. Saw his brothers down, panicked. Tried to retrieve the PKM to complete the mission. Quinn's third shot caught him mid-stride. He fell across the weapon. 3 targets. 3 shots. 11 seconds total. In the Tactical Operations Center, Commander Thornton stared at his radio in disbelief. Around him, monitors showed nothing but white static and error messages. Millions of dollars in sensor equipment rendered useless by atmospheric conditions one staff sergeant had predicted 18 hours ago. "Sir, we're getting radio traffic from the assault team." The radio operator's voice was shaken. They're reporting shots fired from an unknown position. Enemy casualties. They had no idea hostiles were there. Master Chief Sutherland's voice crackled over the speaker. "Chapman, this is actual. Unknown shooter just engaged 3 enemy positions we couldn't see. Targets were in perfect ambush positions. We would have walked right into it. Who the hell is shooting?" Thornton grabbed the handset. His hand was shaking. "Actual, this is Chapman. Stand by, Mom." Gunnery Sergeant McReady stepped forward from the back of the TOC. His expression was calm, almost satisfied. "Sir, I believe that's Staff Sergeant Aldridge. And before anyone says another word, you should know whose granddaughter she is." Thornton spun toward him. "I know who her grandfather was, Gunny. Do you know Master Sergeant Thaddeus Aldridge? He held a ridge at Chosin for 72 hours, when every piece of equipment was frozen solid. Do you know he made 73 confirmed kills with iron sights when Chinese forces outnumbered Marines 15-1. Do you know he saved 43 Marines by taking an unauthorized position because he saw what officers with frozen equipment couldn't? The TOC went silent. Even the hum of failing electronics seemed to pause. McCready continued, his voice carrying decades of authority. That's Tack Aldridge's granddaughter on that ridge. She's using his spotting scope from Korea. His techniques, his methods. The same ones that won battles when technology failed. And right now, she's the only thing standing between our boys and a massacre. Another voice on the radio, the SEAL sniper from the Eastern Ridge. Young, shaken. Chapman Overwatch 2, I have zero visibility. Thermal is complete whiteout. Laser rangefinder shows error codes. Cannot acquire targets. Cannot support the team. Then Quinn's voice. Calm as stone. Professional. Overwatch 2, this is Overwatch 1. I have your targets. I have your team. I have the high ground. Sutherland's transmission, Overwatch 1, identify yourself. A pause, then, Master Chief, this is Staff Sergeant Quinn Aldridge, and I'm doing what my grandfather taught me, saving my brothers when the equipment fails. Thornton closed his eyes. When he opened them, something fundamental had shifted in his expression. Not acceptance, not yet, but recognition. The understanding that his plan had failed and someone else's was working. He picked up the handset. His voice was controlled, professional. Aldridge, this is Chapman Actual. Continue mission. You have operational control of Overwatch. Keep our boys alive. On the northern ridge, Quinn felt no satisfaction, only focus, because the situation was about to get worse. Through Tack's spotting scope, she'd spotted the fourth position, the one with the DSHK heavy machine gun. And the fighter manning it was traversing the weapon toward the SEAL team. She keyed her radio. All elements, fourth target, heavy machine gun, stand by for engagement. Range 1,420 meters. Wind increasing, 20 knots gusting to 25. The DSHK gunner was moving, adjusting his aim. Quinn didn't have time for perfect calculations. She had seconds. Training took over. Muscle memory, instinct refined by 10,000 repetitions. She adjusted her hold, compensated for wind and range, led the moving target, squeezed. The bullet took 2.3 seconds to reach the target. In that time, the DSHK gunner's finger had begun to squeeze his own trigger. Quinn's round arrived first. Center mass. The gunner fell backward. His weapon fired a wild burst into the sky as dead hands lost control. The valley echoed with the sound. Then silence. Sutherland's voice on the radio. Quiet. Respectful. Overwatch 1, that's 4 for 4. Outstanding shooting. Quinn chambered another round. Scanned for additional threats. Found none. The Taliban had positioned 4 machine guns for a perfect ambush. All 4 were neutralized. The SEAL team could advance safely. Actual, you're clear to proceed to objective. No additional threats visible from this position. Copy that, Overwatch 1. Moving now. The SEAL team advanced. Fast. Professional. They reached the compound and breached with the efficiency of men who'd done this 1,000 times. Flashbangs, controlled aggression, room clearing. 5 minutes later, Chapman Actual, objective secure, HVT in custody, 0 friendly casualties. In the TOC, Thornton set down the handset, looked at the bank of monitors that had failed him. All the technology, all the sensors, all the confidence in modern systems. Useless when atmospheric physics said no. But one soldier with a 72-year-old spotting scope and her grandfather's training had done what the technology couldn't. He picked up the handset again. Aldridge, this is Chapman Actual. Well done. Return to base when assault element is secure. We need to talk. Quinn acknowledged and began the careful process of breaking down her position. Packing gear, policing brass, leaving no trace she'd been there except for 4 enemy bodies and 6 living Americans who would have been dead without her. As she worked, she pulled out Tack's journal one more time, flipped to an entry from December 1951, made a shot today that saved Lieutenant Bradley. He was pinned down. Chinese soldier had him zeroed, 900 meters through a blizzard. Couldn't see the target, only knew where he had to be based on Bradley's position. Took the shot on faith and mathematics. Hit. Bradley wants to recommend me for a medal. I told him don't bother. Medals are for people who need recognition. I need my brothers to go home alive. That's the only reward that matters. But he's writing it up anyway. Says some things need to be recognized even if the person doesn't want recognition. We'll see. Officers love their paperwork. Quinn smiled sadly. TAC had gotten that recommendation, and it had been denied by Lieutenant Commander Adrian Thornton. Commander Whitaker Thornton's father. History repeating itself. And Aldridge doing the right thing, a Thornton having to decide what happened next. She closed the journal and began the climb down. The sun was fully up now, the thermal inversion dissipating. The SEAL team's equipment was probably working again, too late to matter, but working. Technology was wonderful when it worked, fatal when you depended on it exclusively. Quinn had proven that this morning with 4 shots across extreme range, using techniques 72 years old. She wondered what Commander Thornton would do, court-martial her for insubordination, or recognize that sometimes breaking the rules was the only way to follow them. She'd know soon enough. The climb down took 45 minutes. When she reached the valley floor, the SEAL team was loading the prisoner. They stopped what they were doing, turned to look at her. Master Chief Sutherland walked over, looked at the rifle slung across her back, at TAC's spotting scope hanging from her belt, at the quiet confidence on her face despite obvious exhaustion. He extended his hand. "Staff Sergeant." She shook it. His grip was firm, respectful. "That was the finest precision marksmanship I've witnessed in 23 years. You saved 6 lives today, mine included. Whatever happens next, I want you to know that." The other SEALs were nodding. One of them, a younger operator, spoke up. "Ma'am, I was walking point. That first PKM had me dead to rights. I was gone if you missed. You didn't miss." Quinn didn't know what to do. She'd expected anger, resentment, accusations of grandstanding, not gratitude. Sutherland seemed to read her thoughts. "You're going to catch hell for this. Commander Thornton doesn't forgive easily, but we know what you did and why. That matters." They drove back to Chapman in silence. The mission was complete. HVT captured, an intelligence goldmine, 0 casualties, by any objective measure a perfect operation. Except it had only succeeded because one staff sergeant had violated direct orders and used 72-year-old techniques when 21st century technology failed. Quinn sat in the passenger seat watching the Afghan landscape roll past. Ancient rocks, timeless mountains, land that had watched armies come and go for millennia. The Romans had tried to conquer it, the British, the Soviets, now the Americans, all of them learning the same lessons in blood. Technology didn't win wars, people did, training did, fundamentals did. Her grandfather had known that, had tried to teach it, had been punished for proving it. Now history was repeating itself, and Quinn was about to learn whether this generation had learned anything from the last one. Back at Chapman, she was directed straight to Commander Thornton's office. No time to clean up, no time to process what had happened, just immediate reckoning. She knocked, entered when called, stood at attention. Thornton sat behind his desk. Gunnery Sergeant McCready stood to one side. Between them, spread across the desk, were documents, service records, after-action reports, and one old file folder with yellowed pages that looked like it had come from deep archives. Thornton looked up. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were different than they'd been at the briefing. Something had changed. "Staff Sergeant Aldridge, do you understand the seriousness of what you did this morning?" "Yes, sir." "You violated a direct order, left your assigned position, engaged enemy forces without authorization, assumed operational control without authority." He paused. "Any one of those violations could end your career." "Yes, sir." "And given the same situation tomorrow, would you do it again?" Quinn met his eyes, held his gaze. "Sir, 6 men are alive who would be dead. If that cost me my career, that's a price I'll pay every time." Something flickered across Thornton's face, not anger. Something deeper. Something that might have been respect mixed with pain. "Dismiss, Staff Sergeant. Get cleaned up. We'll talk more later." Quinn saluted and left. As she walked across the compound, she felt the weight of what she'd done settling on her shoulders. Not regret, never regret, but awareness. She'd saved 6 lives by ending 4. That was the trade. That was always the trade. And somewhere in the mountains on a frozen ridge in Korea, her grandfather's ghost was probably smiling. She'd done what Aldredges did, broken the rules to follow them, violated orders to complete the mission, chosen lives over regulations. TAC would be proud. The only question was whether the system would learn from it this time, or whether history would repeat itself again. Quinn stood outside Commander Thornton's office for 3 minutes after being dismissed. Her hands weren't shaking, her breathing was steady, but something fundamental had shifted inside her. She'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, saved 6 lives by ending 4, violated orders to complete the mission, just like TAC had chosen. The question now was whether the punishment would be the same. She walked to her quarters through mid-morning heat. Other soldiers stared as she passed. Word had already spread. The analyst who went rogue, the woman who made impossible shots, the granddaughter carrying a 72-year-old legacy. She didn't acknowledge the stares, just moved with purpose toward the small room that held her gear and her uncertain future. Inside, she sat on her rack and opened TAC's Korean War Journal. Not to read it, just to hold something that had survived worse than what she was facing. The leather was warm, solid, real in a way that regulations and procedures never were. A knock on her door. She opened it to find Master Chief Sutherland standing there with a cardboard box. "May I?" She stepped aside. He entered and set the box on her footlocker. "Went through my gear, found something that belongs with you now." He opened the box. Inside was a challenge coin, but not a standard one. This one was old, worn, the gold plating rubbed thin from decades of handling. "This was given to me by my first team chief, Vietnam-era SEAL. He got it from a Marine raider in 1968. That Marine got it from a scout sniper at Chosin, your grandfather." Quinn picked up the coin. One side showed the Marine Corps emblem. The other side was engraved, "Hold the line. Chosin, 1951. "How do you know it was TAC's?" Sutherland pulled out a faded photograph. Black and white. Young Marines in winter gear. One of them held up a coin. The same coin. On the back of the photo, written in pencil, "TAC Aldridge, December 1951, day after we held the line." This coin has passed through 5 generations of warriors. Men who understood that sometimes the mission requires violating the plan. You're the 6th, and the first woman to carry it. TAC would approve. He handed her the photo too. "There's a note on the back of that photograph. Read it when you're alone. It matters." After Sutherland left, Quinn turned over the photograph. Below the identification of TAC, someone had written in different handwriting, different ink added years later. "Recommended for Navy Cross, December 1951. Denied by Lt. Cdr A. Thornton for insubordination." TAC never spoke of it, but we remembered. When they asked him why he didn't protest the denial, he said, 43 Marines went home to their families. "That's my medal." Signed Sergeant James Bradley, USMC Red, 1999. Quinn's hands tightened on the photograph. Commander Whitaker Thornton's father had denied TAC's Navy Cross, and now Whitaker was deciding her fate for doing exactly the same thing his father had punished. History wasn't repeating, it was echoing. Another knock. This time Gunnery Sergeant McReady. "Got 10 minutes, Commander wants to see you again, and this time it's not alone." The briefing room was different than last night. Fewer people, more tension. Commander Thornton stood at the front. Beside him, a man Quinn didn't recognize. Civilian clothes, government contractor look. Early 50s, the kind of face that spent more time in Pentagon corridors than combat zones. "Staff Sergeant Aldridge, this is Michael Reeves from Defense Advanced Systems. He's here to discuss this morning's equipment performance." Reeves didn't extend his hand. "Staff Sergeant, I've reviewed the sensor logs from this morning's operation. What happened was an anomaly. Thermal systems performed within acceptable parameters given extreme atmospheric conditions." "They failed," Quinn said flatly. "They encountered conditions outside normal operational envelopes." "That's a fancy way of saying they failed when we needed them most." Reeves's expression hardened. "The systems we've deployed represent billions in appropriations. They work 99% of the time. This morning was the 1%. That 1% almost killed 6 men. Which is why we have redundancy, backup systems, protocols." Quinn looked at Thornton. "Sir, permission to speak freely." Thornton nodded. Reeves, your backup systems all failed for the same reason. Atmospheric inversion. Multiple redundant systems affected by the same environmental factor equals zero redundancy. That's not a protocol problem. That's a fundamental flaw in doctrine. We've become so dependent on technology that we've lost the ability to function without it. And you think 70-year-old Korean War techniques are the answer? I think they're an answer, not the answer. We should train technology-dependent tactics and manual backup skills. When my grandfather fought at Chosin, equipment failed because of extreme cold. They survived because their training didn't require equipment. Today, equipment failed because of atmospheric conditions. The reason changes. The solution doesn't. Reeves turned to Thornton. Commander, is the Army really taking tactical advice from an intelligence analyst? This intelligence analyst saved 6 of my men this morning using the techniques you're dismissing. By violating direct orders, by going rogue, by undermining the chain of command. Reeves pulled out a tablet. I've been asked by the Pentagon to assess whether this incident represents a systemic training failure or an individual discipline problem. Based on this conversation, I'm leaning toward the latter. McCready spoke for the first time. Mr. Reeves, with respect, you're missing the point. This isn't about one staff sergeant. It's about an entire generation of soldiers who can't function when the batteries die. That's the systemic failure. Your opinion is noted, Gunnery Sergeant, but you're scheduled to retire in 4 months. This doesn't really concern you. It concerns every warrior who remembers what happened when we over-relied on technology. Beirut, Mogadishu, Fallujah. Every time we learn the same lesson. Fundamentals matter. And every time we forget it as soon as the next shiny toy arrives. Reeves stood. Commander Thornton, I'll be filing my report within 48 hours. I recommend formal disciplinary action against Staff Sergeant Aldridge and a review of training protocols in this unit. The Pentagon cannot condone violations of orders regardless of outcome. After he left the room, sat in heavy silence. Thornton looked at Quinn. He's going to push for your court-martial, and he has support at the Pentagon. People who don't want the story of technology failing to become public. What story, sir? The mission succeeded. Exactly, because one soldier with old techniques did what millions in equipment couldn't. That's embarrassing to the people who approved those appropriations. They'd prefer you failed so they could justify ignoring your methods. Since you didn't fail, they'll settle for punishing you to keep others from trying. So what happens now? Thornton walked to the window, looked out at the base. Now I make a choice, the same choice my father made 72 years ago. Protect the system or protect the soldier. He turned to face her. McCready told me what my father did. Denied your grandfather's Navy Cross. I didn't know. My father never spoke of Korea, died when I was 26, never explained his decisions. Sir, you're not responsible for praying. I'm responsible for what I do next, and I won't make his mistake. Thornton's voice hardened with decision. I'm recommending you for the Bronze Star with Valor. I'm also submitting a posthumous Navy Cross recommendation for your grandfather, and I'm formally disputing Reeves' assessment in my after-action report. That'll end your career, sir. Maybe, but I've got 6 months until retirement anyway, and some things matter more than a smooth exit. He picked up a folder from his desk. There's something else. After your grandfather's Navy Cross was denied in 1952, Lieutenant Bradley appealed. Twice. Both times rejected. But he kept copies of everything. His family donated his papers to the Marine Corps Archives in 2003. McCready requested them. They arrived this morning. He handed Quinn the folder. Inside were documents from 1951-1952, the original Navy Cross recommendation, Bradley's appeals, and a letter she'd never seen before. It was from her grandfather, dated March 1952, addressed to Lieutenant Bradley, Jim. Stop fighting this. The Navy Cross doesn't matter. You know why I did what I did? I did it because 43 Marines were going to if I stayed in my assigned position. Orders said stay. Common sense said move. I moved. We won. That's the only medal that counts. Some officers need to punish independence because it threatens their authority. Let them. I know what I did. The men I saved know. That's enough. Don't sacrifice your career fighting for mine. Tack. Quinn read it twice. Her vision blurred. He never told anyone, she said quietly. Never complained, just moved on. Because he knew what mattered, McCready said. Results over recognition, mission over medals, brothers over brass. He paused. But knowing what matters and getting what's deserved are different things. Tack deserved that Navy Cross. You deserve not to be punished for doing the same thing he did. Thornton nodded. I've also sent a copy of these documents to Senator Robert Mitchell, chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Vietnam veteran. He takes care of warriors who get screwed by bureaucrats. Sir, you're risking a lot. I'm correcting a lot, starting with my father's mistake. Thornton's expression softened slightly. Dismiss, Staff Sergeant. Get some rest. The next few days are going to be difficult. Quinn left the briefing room carrying the folder of documents. Tack's words echoed in her mind. He'd been offered a chance to fight for his medal and declined, chosen to protect his lieutenant instead of pursuing his own recognition. That was the warrior's code, not the one in regulations, the one in blood, in sacrifice, in choosing what mattered most. She spent the afternoon in her quarters reading through every document in the folder, building a picture of what had happened in 1952. Lieutenant Commander Adrian Thornton had denied the Navy Cross with a one-paragraph justification. Insubordination, regardless of outcome, cannot be rewarded. To do so undermines command authority and creates dangerous precedent. But there was another document, a letter from Adrian Thornton to his wife dated 1953. Personal correspondence that had somehow ended up in Bradley's papers. I denied Sergeant Aldridge's medal because he embarrassed me, made me look foolish. My plan failed and his succeeded. I couldn't admit that, so I hid behind regulations and procedure. I've regretted it every day since, but pride won't let me correct it. God forgive me. Quinn set down the letter. So it wasn't about principle. It was about ego. A lieutenant commander too proud to admit a sergeant saw something he didn't. And now that lieutenant commander's son was facing the same choice. But Whitaker Thornton was choosing differently. That evening, Sutherland found Quinn on the firing range. She was cleaning her rifle. Methodical, precise, the way Tack had taught her. Mine company. She gestured to the bench beside her. Sutherland sat. Wanted to tell you something about this morning. When you were calling out targets and I was walking point, there was a moment when I knew we were in the kill zone. Could feel it. That sixth sense you develop after enough combat. And I knew our Overwatch couldn't see what I was feeling. He was quiet for a moment. I've got 2 daughters, 7 and 9. They think Dad's a superhero, invincible. This morning I was 30 seconds from proving them wrong, from not coming home. And then I heard your voice on the radio, calm, professional, calling out threats I couldn't see, making shots I didn't think were possible. He pulled something from his pocket, a seal trident pin, gold, worn. This belonged to my first team chief. He gave it to me when I earned mine, said to pass it forward when I met someone who embodied what it meant to be a warrior, someone who put mission over self, brothers over career, duty over comfort. He pressed it into her hand. That's you, Quinn. You're not a SEAL, but you're what we aspire to be. Quinn looked at the pin. Chief, I can't accept this. Yes, you can. Because 48 hours from now, the Pentagon's going to try to destroy you for doing the right thing. And when that happens, I want you to look at that pin and remember. 6 men know what you did. 6 families still have fathers and husbands and sons because you ignored an order and followed your conscience. That's worth more than any medal they could give or any punishment they could impose. He stood to leave, then paused. One more thing. We took a team vote, unanimous. If they court-martial you, all 6 of us are requesting to testify. And if they won't let us, we're going to the media. You saved our lives. We don't abandon the people who save our lives. After he left, Quinn sat alone on the range as the sun set. She held 2 objects now. The challenge coin from Chosin, the seal trident from a man she'd saved. Both represented the same thing. The understanding that regulations were tools, not masters. That sometimes breaking rules was the only way to follow them. Tack had understood that, had paid for it with a denied medal and 50 years of official silence. Now Quinn was about to learn if this generation had learned anything from that mistake. 2 days later, the storm arrived, not from Afghanistan, from Washington, a Pentagon investigation team. 3 officers, 2 JAG lawyers, 1 congressman's aide. They set up in the operations center and began interviewing everyone involved in the mission. The questions weren't about tactics or outcomes. They were about authority and protocols and who authorized what when. Quinn was interviewed for 3 hours. They asked the same questions multiple ways, tried to catch inconsistencies, pushed her to admit she'd acted recklessly, emotionally, without proper judgment. She answered every question the same way. I saw a threat. I assessed my capability to neutralize that threat. I took action under defensive engagement doctrine to prevent imminent loss of friendly forces. The outcome validated the decision. But you violated direct orders. I prevented 6 deaths. That's not for you to decide. Chain of command exists for a reason. Chain of command makes sense when the commanding officer has better information than the subordinate. In this case, I had information he didn't. 4 enemy positions invisible to all electronic sensors. I could see them. I had the capability to engage them. Waiting for authorization meant 6 dead Americans. So you're saying you're authorized to override commanders whenever you think you know better? I'm saying defensive engagement doctrine exists because sometimes immediate threats require immediate response. I'm also saying that over-reliance on technology creates vulnerabilities that manual skills can address. My grandfather learned that in Korea. I relearned it here. The lead investigator, a colonel named Harrison, leaned forward. Your grandfather, Master Sergeant Thaddeus Aldridge, also violated orders, also had his medal denied. Do you see a pattern? Yes, sir, I see a pattern of warriors doing what's necessary and bureaucrats punishing them for it. Harrison's face went red. You're dismissed, Staff Sergeant. We'll submit our findings to the convening authority. Outside the interview room, McCready was waiting. How bad? They're going to recommend court-martial. They've already decided. They just need the paperwork to match. Then it's time for Plan B. What's Plan B? McCready smiled. The old guard rises. 1,200 miles away in North Carolina, retired Master Gunnery Sergeant William McGrath was eating breakfast when his phone rang. 93 years old, chosen reservoir survivor, one of the 43 men Tack Aldridge had saved in December 1951. McGrath, Gunny, it's Callahan McCready. We served together in Beirut. I remember. What do you need? I need you to make some calls. Tack Aldridge's granddaughter just did exactly what Tack did. Saved 6 men by breaking rules. Pentagon wants to court-martial her, just like they denied Tack's Navy Cross 72 years ago. Silence on the line. Then give me 2 hours. McGrath made 17 calls to other chosen survivors, to Korean War veteran associations, to Marines who'd served with Tack over the years, to men who understood that some stories needed to be told regardless of what bureaucrats wanted. His message was simple. Tack Aldridge saved 43 of us in 1951, got punished for it. Now they're doing the same thing to his granddaughter. We let them do it to Tack. We're not letting them do it to her. By noon, the story was moving through veteran networks, not official channels, the informal brotherhood of men who'd carried rifles in America's wars, email chains, phone calls, social media posts from children and grandchildren. The story was powerful. Tack Aldridge's granddaughter used his Korean War techniques to save American lives when modern technology failed. And now the Pentagon wanted to punish her because it made expensive systems look bad. By evening, it had reached military blogs, veteran websites, small-town newspapers, the kind of grassroots media that Washington couldn't control. By the next morning, it was national news. CNN, female soldier faces court-martial for saving lives using grandfather's Korean War techniques. Fox News, Pentagon punishes warrior for doing what technology couldn't. The Washington Post, when batteries die, how one soldier's manual skills saved 6 lives and triggered Pentagon investigation. Senator Robert Mitchell saw the headlines over breakfast in his Georgetown home. Vietnam veteran, chairman of Senate Armed Services Committee. He'd received Thornton's package of documents 2 days ago, had been planning quiet inquiry. The media coverage changed everything. This wasn't quiet anymore. He made one phone call to the Secretary of Defense. Bob, I've seen the coverage. We're looking into Mitchell's voice was steel. You're investigating a soldier for saving lives, while ignoring the systemic failure that almost got those lives lost in the first place. That's not looking into anything. That's ass covering. Senator, there are protocols, chain of command. She violated. She prevented 6 deaths, 6 Americans who are alive because she remembered skills we've forgotten. And you want to punish her for that? Mitchell paused. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to drop the investigation. You're going to approve her Bronze Star. You're going to approve the posthumous Navy Cross for her grandfather. And you're going to commission a review of training protocols to integrate manual skills with technology-dependent tactics. Senator, I can't just, or I can hold public hearings, televised, where those 6 SEALs testify about how all your expensive equipment failed and one staff sergeant with a Korean War spotting scope saved their lives. Where we examine why we're spending billions on systems that don't work in real-world conditions. Where we ask why we're punishing success and protecting failure. Silence. Then, I'll need 72 hours. You have 48. Back at Forward Operating Base, Chapman Quinn woke to find her door being pounded on at gross 600 hours. She opened it to find Commander Thornton standing there with a tablet. Have you seen this? The tablet showed news coverage, dozens of articles, hundreds of social media posts, veterans organizations issuing statements, Korean War survivors speaking to reporters. The story had exploded. I didn't leak this, Quinn said. I know, McCready activated the old guard. They're fighting for you the way they couldn't fight for TAC. Thornton looked exhausted but satisfied. The Pentagon's getting crucified in the media. They can't punish you now without looking like they're retaliating for bad publicity. So, it's over. Not over, changed. Senator Mitchell called this morning. He's forcing the Pentagon to reconsider. But he wants something in return. Public hearings on training protocols and technology dependence. You'll testify. So will I. So will the SEALs you saved. When 2 weeks, Washington Full Senate Armed Services Committee. Thornton handed her official orders. You're being temporarily reassigned to CONUS for congressional testimony. Flight leaves tomorrow. Quinn took the orders, read them twice. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about something bigger. About whether the military would learn from its mistakes or repeat them. About whether tax sacrifice 72 years ago would finally mean something. That evening, she packed her gear. Tax spotting scope. His journal. The challenge coin from Chosin. The SEAL trident from Sutherland. And one more thing. She pulled out her phone and did something she rarely did. Called her mother. Quinn, is everything okay? I'm fine, Mom. I wanted to tell you something about Grandpa Tack. She spent 30 minutes explaining what had happened. The mission, the shots, the investigation, the media storm, and finally the Navy Cross that might actually happen after 72 years. Her mother was crying by the end. He never told us, never said anything about being denied a medal, just told stories about the men he served with. Because that's what mattered to him. The men, not the medals. He'd be so proud of you, Quinn. I hope so, because I did exactly what he did, and I'd do it again. After she hung up, Quinn sat alone in her quarters one last time. Tomorrow she'd fly to Washington, face senators and journalists and Pentagon officials who wanted this story to go away quietly. But it wouldn't go away, because 20,000 Korean War veterans had decided it was time to stop being quiet. Time to remind America that technology was a tool, not a replacement for warriors. Time to honor Tack Aldridge the way he should have been honored 7 decades ago. Quinn opened his journal one last time, not to read his words, but to write her own. On a blank page at the back, she wrote, Grandpa, you taught me that medals don't matter. Only brothers matter. You were right, but sometimes fighting for medals means fighting for what they represent, for recognizing that warriors matter more than systems, that people matter more than equipment, that courage should be rewarded, not punished. I'm fighting for your medal, not because you needed it, but because the warriors coming after us need to know that doing the right thing eventually gets recognized. Even if it takes 72 years, even if it costs everything. Love, Quinn. She closed the journal. Tomorrow, the real battle began, not in Afghanistan, in Washington, not against enemies, against inertia and ego and institutional resistance to admitting mistakes. But she wouldn't fight alone. 6 SEALs stood with her. Commander Thornton stood with her. Gunnery Sergeant McCready stood with her. And 20,000 Korean War veterans stood with her. Most importantly, tact stood with her, not in person, but in principle. In example, in the legacy that said sometimes breaking rules was the only way to follow them. She packed the journal carefully, grabbed her duffel bag, and walked out of her quarters toward whatever came next. Behind her, forward operating base, Chapman hummed with its electronic heartbeat, sensors and systems and technology that worked 99% of the time. Quinn had proven what happened during the other 1%. Now she had to make sure that lesson wasn't forgotten. Again, Washington, D.C. in late September was a different kind of battlefield. No mortars, no machine guns, just power and politics and men in suits who'd never heard a shot fired in anger, deciding the fates of those who had. Quinn stood outside the Russell Senate office building watching black SUVs and town cars deposit senators and staffers. 2 weeks ago, she'd been on a ridge in Afghanistan. Now she was here about to testify before the Senate Armed Services Committee about why she'd violated orders to save 6 lives. Commander Thornton stood beside her, McCready on the other side, all three in dress uniforms. All three knowing the next few hours would define careers and legacies. Nervous? Thornton asked. Terrified. But Grandpa Tack faced worse. Much worse. He faced it alone. You have us. They entered the building. Security checkpoints. ID verification. The bureaucratic choreography of official Washington. Eventually they reached the hearing room. Massive, wood-paneled. The kind of space designed to remind people that serious decisions happened here. The room was packed. Journalists, congressional staffers, veterans organizations, and in the gallery wearing suits that didn't quite fit anymore sat 12 elderly men, Korean War veterans, average age 91. They'd flown in from across the country to watch justice finally arrive 7 decades late. Master Gunnery Sergeant William McGrath sat in the front row, 93 years old, wearing his dress blues with medals that told a story of service from Chosin to retirement. He caught Quinn's eye and nodded once. The nod said, "We're here. We remember, and we won't let them forget." Senator Robert Mitchell gavelled the hearing to order, 76 years old, silver hair, the bearing of a man who'd earned his authority in rice paddies in Vietnam, not Georgetown cocktail parties. This committee is called to order. We're here to examine 2 related issues. First, the role of manual skills and traditional techniques in modern military training. Second, the case of Staff Sergeant Quinn Aldridge and Master Sergeant Thaddeus Aldridge, whose actions 72 years apart raise important questions about how we reward initiative and punish success. He looked directly at Quinn. Staff Sergeant Aldridge, you're called to testify first. Please raise your right hand. Quinn was sworn in, sat at the witness table, alone under the lights with cameras and power focused on her. Mitchell's first question was direct. Staff Sergeant, in your own words, describe what happened on September 23rd. Quinn took a breath, then told the story. Not dramatically, just facts. The mission brief, her analysis of atmospheric conditions, the dismissal of her concerns, her decision to position herself on the northern ridge, the equipment failures, the 4 Taliban positions, the shots, the outcome. 6 men came home alive who would have died. That's what happened. Senator James Burkhart, ranking member from Texas, leaned forward. Former Army colonel, 3 tours in Iraq. He understood combat, but also understood institutions. Staff Sergeant, you violated a direct order from your commanding officer. You left your assigned position. You engaged targets without authorization. How do you justify that? Sir, I don't justify it. I accept responsibility for it. I made a decision in the moment based on imminent threat to friendly forces. Defensive engagement doctrine authorizes immediate action to prevent loss of life. I had capability. I had position. I had sight picture. Waiting for authorization meant 6 dead Americans. But commanders give orders for reasons. Chain of command exists because we can't have everyone doing whatever they think is best. I agree, sir. Chain of command is essential, but it assumes the commander has better information than the subordinate. In this case, I had information Commander Thornton didn't have. 4 enemy positions invisible to all our sensors. I could see them through manual observation. Electronic systems couldn't. Someone had to act. Senator Patricia Alderson from California jumped in. She'd been skeptical of military spending for years. Staff Sergeant, why did our electronic systems fail? We've spent billions on these sensor platforms. Ma'am, they didn't fail due to defects. They failed because physics doesn't care about appropriations. Thermal inversion created atmospheric conditions that blind thermal imaging. That's not an equipment problem. That's a training problem. We've become so dependent on technology that we've lost the ability to function when it fails. And you're saying we should go back into Korean War techniques? No, ma'am, I'm saying we should train both. Use technology when it works. Have manual skills when it doesn't. My grandfather survived Chosin because he trained for equipment failure. I survived because he taught me what he'd learned. We shouldn't choose between old and new. We should integrate them. Mitchell nodded. Staff Sergeant, I've read your grandfather's service record. I've also read Lieutenant Commander Adrian Thornton's justification for denying his Navy Cross. It says, and I quote, "Insubordination, regardless of outcome, cannot be rewarded." Do you agree with that statement? No, sir. Why not? Because it values process over results. It says following bad orders is more important than saving lives. I understand the need for discipline, but discipline exists to make the military effective, not to make commanders comfortable. When discipline prevents effectiveness, it needs to be questioned. Burkhart shook his head. That's a dangerous philosophy, Staff Sergeant. If every soldier decides which orders to follow based on their own judgment, we don't have a military. We have a mob with guns. I agree that would be dangerous, sir, but there's a difference between selective obedience and emergency action. I didn't violate orders because I disagreed with Commander Thornton's plan. I violated orders because the situation changed in ways he couldn't see from his position. New information, new threats, required new action. Mitchell looked at his notes. Let's talk about that new information. You identified 4 enemy positions using a spotting scope from 1951, Korean War vintage, while our modern systems saw nothing. How is that possible? The scope doesn't rely on electronics, sir. It's just glass. Good glass. Clear sight picture. The thermal inversion that blinded our electronic sensors didn't affect manual optics. I could see the Taliban fighters moving. Our systems couldn't. So you're saying a 72-year-old scope is better than modern equipment? No, sir. I'm saying they serve different purposes in different conditions. Modern thermal imaging is superior 99% of the time. But in that 1%, when atmospheric conditions shut it down, manual optics still work. We need both. Senator Alderson leaned in. Staff Sergeant, I've read reports that you made 4 confirmed kills at ranges exceeding 1,300 meters. Through wind, using manual calculations. Is that accurate? Yes, ma'am. How did you calculate those shots without a computer? My grandfather taught me range estimation using visual cues, wind reading from mirage and dust, bullet drop calculations using basic physics. The same methods Marine snipers used in Korea before ballistic computers existed. And you're saying soldiers today aren't taught these methods? Many aren't, ma'am. We teach technology-dependent tactics almost exclusively, which works great until the technology fails. Then we have highly trained soldiers who can't function because they've never learned the manual skills. Mitchell held up a document. I have here the Pentagon investigation report. It recommends you be court-martialed for violating orders. It also recommends no changes to training protocols because, and I quote, "The incident represents an anomaly unlikely to recur." Staff Sergeant, do you believe this was an anomaly? No, sir. Atmospheric conditions that blind sensors occur regularly in certain environments. Desert inversions, mountain weather, jungle humidity, urban heat patterns. We fight in all those environments. If we don't train for sensor degradation, we're setting soldiers up for failure. That's quite an indictment of current training. It's an observation based on experience, sir. Mitchell looked past Quinn to where Thornton sat. Commander Thornton, you are called to testify. Thornton took the witness seat. His face was calm, but Quinn could see the tension in his shoulders. This was his career on the line now, his father's legacy on the table. Commander, you were Staff Sergeant Aldridge's commanding officer during the incident. You gave her a direct order to remain at her assigned position. She violated that order. What's your assessment? Thornton didn't hesitate. Senator Staff Sergeant Aldridge saved 6 of my men by violating my order. As their commander, I'm grateful. As an officer responsible for discipline, I was initially furious. As someone who's had 2 weeks to think about it, I'm ashamed. Ashamed of what? Ashamed that I made the same mistake my father made 72 years ago. I overvalued procedure and undervalued judgment. I trusted technology more than human expertise, and 6 men almost died because of it. The room went silent. Admitting mistakes in congressional testimony was rare. Admitting mistakes that implicated dead parents was unprecedented. Mitchell let the moment breathe. Then, "Commander, tell us about your father." Lieutenant Commander Adrian Thornton, Korean War. Task Force Commander. He denied Master Sergeant Aldridge's Navy Cross recommendation in 1952. His written justification said insubordination couldn't be rewarded. But that wasn't the real reason. Thornton pulled out a letter. His hands were shaking slightly. "This is a personal letter from my father to my mother dated 1953. It was in his effects after he died. I only recently read it. With the committee's permission, I'd like to read it into the record." Mitchell nodded. Thornton read, "I denied Sergeant Aldridge's medal because he embarrassed me, made me look foolish. My plan failed and his succeeded. I couldn't admit that, so I hid behind regulations and procedure. I've regretted it every day since. But pride won't let me correct it. God forgive me." He set down the letter. "My father was a good officer, but he made one terrible decision driven by ego. He spent the rest of his life regretting it. 2 weeks ago, I almost made the same decision." Staff Sergeant Aldridge's analysis was correct. My plan was flawed. She saw it. I dismissed her. And when she saved my men by ignoring my orders, my first instinct was to punish her for making me look bad. "What changed your mind?" Gunnery Sergeant McCready showed me the documents about my father's decision, showed me I was about to repeat history, and I realized I could protect my ego or I could protect my soldiers. Some things matter more than pride. Mitchell studied Thornton. "You're aware that your testimony here will likely end your career, that you're admitting to failures of judgment, that you're publicly criticizing your deceased father." "Yes, sir, but my father died carrying guilt over a decision driven by pride. I won't make that mistake. Staff Sergeant Aldridge deserves recognition, not punishment. My father's decision was wrong. The Pentagon's recommendation for court-martial is wrong. And if saying that publicly cost me my career, that's a small price for doing what's right." Burkhart shook his head. "Commander, this is all very noble, but we can't run a military where subordinates decide which orders to follow based on whether they think commanders are wrong. That's chaos. With respect, Senator, that's not what I'm advocating. I'm advocating for training that prepares soldiers for situations where the plan fails, where equipment doesn't work, where unexpected conditions require adaptation. Staff Sergeant Aldridge adapted. She did what the situation required. And she did it using skills we should be teaching everyone, not just a few specialists who happen to have had Korean War veterans as grandparents." Senator Mitchell held up his hand. "Let's hear from one of those Korean War veterans. Master Gunnery Sergeant William McGrath, you're called to testify." McGrath stood slowly, walked to the witness table with the careful steps of a 93-year-old man carrying decades of memories. He was sworn in, sat down, looked directly at the senators. "Gentlemen and ladies, I'm here because Master Sergeant Tack Aldridge saved my life on December 6, 1951. I was in a frozen ditch at Chosin Reservoir with Chinese soldiers 50 meters away. Couldn't move without being shot. Couldn't stay without freezing to death. Was waiting to die. Tack made a 900-meter shot through a blizzard and dropped the soldier who had me pinned. Then he talked me out of that ditch using a radio that barely worked. I went home to my family because of him." His voice strengthened. "Tack was recommended for the Navy Cross. Commander Thornton's father denied it. Said it set a bad precedent. Know what that did? It told every warrior in Korea that doing the right thing got you punished if it made officers look bad. It told us to follow orders even when orders would get people killed. That's not leadership. That's cowardice hiding behind regulations." "Mr. McGrath," Burkhart started, "we understand you're grateful to Sergeant Aldridge." "Master Sergeant," McGrath corrected sharply. "He earned the rank. Use it." "Master Sergeant Aldridge. But one man's heroic action 70 years ago doesn't change the need for discipline today." "You're right, it doesn't. What it changes is how we think about discipline. Real discipline means doing the hard thing when it matters. Tack did the hard thing, got punished, carried that for 50 years. Now his granddaughter did the same hard thing, and you want to punish her too. McGrath leaned forward. I'm 93 years old, buried most of the men I served with. But 12 of us are here today. We flew in from across the country. Some of us can barely walk. But we're here because we remember what Tack did. We remember that the system failed him, and we're here to make sure it doesn't fail his granddaughter. The other Korean War veterans in the gallery stood, slowly, some with canes, some with walkers, but all standing, a silent testimony that carried more weight than any words. Mitchell waited until they sat again. Mr. McGrath, what would you recommend? Approve Quinn's Bronze Star, approve Tack's Navy Cross, and mandate training and manual skills for every sniper, every forward observer, every soldier who might need to function when the batteries die, because they will die. Physics doesn't care about your budget, and when equipment fails, soldiers need skills, not excuses. The hearing continued for 3 more hours, more testimony, more questions, Pentagon officials defending their systems, training commanders explaining protocols, contractors insisting the equipment worked as designed. But the emotional center had been established. 12 old men who'd survived the worst winter battle in American history, a commander admitting his father's mistake, a warrior who'd done what was necessary despite the cost. When Mitchell finally gavelled the session closed, he made one statement. This committee will issue recommendations within 30 days. Those recommendations will address training protocols, equipment redundancy, and the specific cases of both Staff Sergeant Quinn Aldridge and Master Sergeant Thaddeus Aldridge. This hearing is adjourned. Outside the building, Quinn was surrounded by reporters, cameras, questions shouted from every direction. Thornton and McCready formed a protective barrier. Staff Sergeant, how do you feel about? Do you think you'll be court-martialed? What would you say to other women? McGrath's voice cut through the chaos, loud, commanding, still carrying the authority of a man who'd led Marines in combat 7 decades ago. She's got nothing to say to you, vultures. She testified. She told the truth. Now leave her be. The reporters fell back, not because they wanted to, because something in McGrath's voice reminded them that some people had earned the right to not be questioned by those who'd never faced what they'd faced. McGrath pulled Quinn's aside, handed her something, a faded photograph, the same one Sutherland had shown her. Young Marines at Chosen, Tack holding up the challenge coin. That's your grandfather the day after he saved 43 of us. Look at his face. See that expression. That's not pride. That's relief. Relief that he did his goal and his brothers went home. That's all he ever wanted. The medal didn't matter to him, but it matters to us. Because recognizing his sacrifice means recognizing what actually wins wars. Not equipment, not budgets. Warriors who remember that brothers matter more than anything. He squeezed her hand. You did him proud, girl. Did all of us proud. The other Korean War veterans gathered around. Some shook her hand, some just nodded. One, a man who looked barely alive, spoke in a whisper. Tack pulled me out of a building that was collapsing. December 7th, I was trapped. He went in alone, got me out, never said a word about it, just did his job. His eyes were wet. Thank you for being his granddaughter, for remembering, for being worthy of him. Quinn's vision blurred. These men had carried Tack's memory for 72 years, had flown across the country in their 90s to stand up for his legacy. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for all of them. That night in a hotel room in Arlington, Quinn sat alone with Tack's journal, opened to a blank page, and wrote, Grandpa, today 12 men who served with you testified before Congress. 90-year-old warriors who can barely walk stood up for you, for me, for what you taught us about duty and sacrifice. Your Navy Cross might finally be approved, 72 years late. But it's happening because those men remembered, because they refused to let the system win. You were right that medals don't matter, but you were also wrong. They matter because they're proof that doing the right thing eventually gets recognized, that the system can learn, can change, can become better. I hope wherever you are you're watching. I hope you're proud. I hope you know that your sacrifice mattered, not just to the 43 men you saved, But to every warrior who comes after, who'll be taught that when equipment fails, training doesn't. When orders are wrong, judgment matters. When the mission requires breaking rules, courage defines us. Love, Quinn. She closed the journal. Tomorrow she'd fly back to Afghanistan to finish her deployment. The hearing was over, but the outcome was uncertain. The Pentagon could still push for court-martial. The committee could issue weak recommendations. Nothing was guaranteed. But she'd done what needed doing. Told the truth, honored tax memory, fought for a principle that mattered. The rest was out of her hands. 31 days later, Quinn was on patrol in Coast Province when she received the message. Official orders, return to base immediately. Priority communication from Senate Armed Services Committee. She read the report in Commander Thornton's office with McCready present. The committee had issued comprehensive recommendations. 1. Bronze Star with Valor approved for Staff Sergeant Quinn Aldridge. 2. Navy Cross approved posthumously for Master Sergeant Thaddeus Aldridge, with apology for the 72-year delay. 3. Immediate stand-down of court-martial proceedings against Staff Sergeant Aldridge. 4. Creation of the Aldridge Manual Marksmanship Initiative. Mandatory training in pre-electronic sniper techniques for all Army and Marine Corps precision marksmen. 5. Pentagon-wide review of over-reliance on technology and tactical planning. Formal reprimand removed from Lieutenant Commander Adrian Thornton's service record with notation that his decision was reconsidered and found to have been an error. Quinn read it twice. Couldn't quite believe it. "It's real," Thornton said quietly. Senator Mitchell pushed it through. The Korean War veteran's testimony was too powerful to ignore. Public support was overwhelming. The Pentagon couldn't fight it. "What about you, sir?" "I'm retiring in 4 months as planned, with an honorable discharge and the satisfaction of knowing I corrected my father's mistake." He smiled slightly. "Turns out admitting you're wrong is career-limiting, but it's also liberating." McCready grinned. "And I'm coming out of retirement temporarily. They want me to help establish the Aldridge Initiative, teach young snipers how to function when the batteries die. Figure I've got one more tour left in me." "Where?" Quinn asked. "Fort Benning Scout Sniper School, and they want you there too, 6 months from now when your deployment ends, as chief instructor." Quinn looked at the orders, at the official recognition of what TAC had done and what she had done, at the proof that sometimes rarely the system learned from its mistakes. "There's one more thing," Thornton said. He pulled out a folder. Inside was a program for a ceremony. "The Navy Cross presentation for your grandfather. It's happening at Arlington National Cemetery, 2 months from now. Full honors. The Commandant of the Marine Corps will present it, and they want you to accept it on his behalf." Quinn's breath caught. "Arlington. He's buried there. Section 60. You can accept his medal at his grave. The way it should have been done 72 years ago." 8 weeks later, Quinn stood in Arlington National Cemetery under October sunshine that seemed too bright for the moment. A crowd had gathered. Korean War veterans, active duty Marines, the 6 SEALs she'd saved, reporters, and her family, her mother, her aunt, her younger brother, all there to witness history correcting itself. TAC's grave had a new headstone. Updated with his Navy Cross designation, Master Sergeant Thaddeus TAC Aldridge, United States Marine Corps, Navy Cross, Purple Heart, 1932-2021, Chosin Reservoir, 1951, 73 confirmed kills. Held the line. The Commandant of the Marine Corps stood in dress blues, 4 stars gleaming, face solemn with the weight of correcting a 72-year-old injustice. "We are here to honor Master Sergeant Thaddeus Aldridge, to recognize 7 decades late what he did at Chosin Reservoir, and to apologize for the failure of leadership that denied him this recognition when it should have been given." He opened the metal case. The Navy Cross gleamed in the sunlight. Dark blue ribbon, bronze cross, the second highest military decoration in the United States. Master Sergeant Aldridge demonstrated extraordinary heroism on December 4th through 6th, 1951. Recognizing that his assigned position provided inadequate observation, he independently moved to an alternate location. From this position, over 72 hours in temperatures reaching 40 degrees below zero, he engaged enemy forces at extreme range, achieving 73 confirmed casualties and enabling the successful withdrawal of 43 Marines who would otherwise have been killed or captured. The Commandant looked at Quinn. "Staff Sergeant Aldridge, Please accept this medal on your grandfather's behalf. And please know we failed him in 1952. We won't fail you, or any warrior who does what's right, regardless of cost." Quinn stepped forward, accepted the medal case, felt the weight of 7 decades of delayed recognition. She knelt beside Tack's grave, placed the Navy Cross case on the headstone, and whispered words only he would hear. "You were right, Grandpapa. The medal didn't matter, but what it represents does. It means they learned. It means the next Quinn Aldridge won't wait 72 years. It means doing the right thing will be recognized, not punished. That's your legacy. Not the kills, not the medal, the proof that the system can change when warriors refuse to accept wrong as right." She stood, saluted the grave. Behind her, 12 Korean War veterans saluted. The SEALs saluted. Active duty Marines saluted. A century of military service honoring one man who'd done his job and asked for nothing in return. Master Gunnery Sergeant McGrath stepped forward, 93 years old, I thinking. Unsteady on his feet but determined, he placed something on the grave. The challenge coin, the same one from the photograph, the one that had passed through 5 generations of warriors. "Tack, you gave this to me in 1951, said to pass it forward when I met someone who embodied what it meant to be a warrior. I'm passing it to you, buddy. You earned it back. Rest easy. Your granddaughter's carrying on. And we're making sure what you taught us doesn't get forgotten." The ceremony concluded. People drifted away slowly. Nobody wanted to be the first to leave. Eventually, only Quinn remained, sitting beside the grave, holding Tack's journal, feeling the weight of legacy and responsibility and the strange lightness that came from knowing you'd done something that mattered. She opened the journal, flipped through pages of calculations and observations, found the entry from December 1951 that had guided her. Real discipline means doing the hard thing when it matters. She closed the journal, stood, touched the headstone one final time. "See you around, Grandpa. I've got soldiers to train, skills to teach, your skills. They'll be ready when the batteries die." She walked through Arlington toward the future. Behind her, rows of white headstones marked the honored dead. In front of her, a car waited to take her back to Fort Benning, to the Aldridge Manual Marksmanship Initiative, to teaching the next generation that technology was a tool, not a crutch, that fundamentals mattered, that when everything failed, training didn't. 6 months later, Fort Benning Scout Sniper School. Quinn stood before a classroom of 32 students, 6 women, 26 men, all young, all tech-dependent, all skeptical. On the table in front of her, Tack's M1C Garand rifle from Korea, his spotting scope, his journal, and his Navy Cross in its case. "My name is Staff Sergeant Quinn Aldridge. Some of you have heard stories about what happened in Afghanistan, about senators and hearings and old men fighting bureaucrats. Forget all that. Here's what matters. I used 72-year-old techniques to save 6 lives when millions of dollars in equipment failed. Not because the old ways are better, because when the new ways fail, you need to know the old ways." She picked up the rifle. This rifle held Chosin Reservoir against impossible odds. My grandfather made 73 confirmed kills with it. No batteries, no computers, just training and will. This rifle is now in the Marine Corps Museum. But before it went there, I fired it. Same accuracy as modern systems, same lethality, different technology, same results. She set down the rifle, picked up the Navy Cross case. This medal took 72 years to get approved, not because my grandfather didn't earn it, because the officer who should have approved it let pride override judgment. That officer's son corrected the mistake, admitted error publicly, ended his career to do the right thing. That's what this medal represents. Not just my grandfather's courage, but the system's ability to learn, to change, to become better. She looked at each student. "For the next 8 weeks, you'll learn to be snipers the way Marines were trained in 1951. Manual calculations, wind reading without instruments, range estimation using geometry. Iron sight fundamentals. You'll do all of it without electronics. Because someday in some godforsaken place, when your ballistic computer dies and your laser rangefinder fails and your thermal scope shows nothing, you'll still need to make the shot. And you will. because you'll know what these men knew 70 years ago, that the equipment changes, but the warrior doesn't. A male student raised his hand, Corporal Marcus Webb. Staff Sergeant, why learn obsolete skills when we have better technology? Because technology isn't better when it doesn't work. It's just expensive metal and plastic. Skills work anywhere, anytime, in any conditions. Technology makes us more effective when it functions. Training makes us effective regardless. The class was brutal. Quinn and McCready designed it that way. No electronic assistance, no calculators, no rangefinders, just observation mathematics and repetition until manual skills became instinct. Students struggled, failed, struggled again, slowly improved. Started understanding that technology had made them lazy, that their brains could do what computers did if they just trained them. Private First Class Addison Reeves approached Quinn after a particularly hard day. Staff Sergeant, my great-grandfather was at Chosin. Sergeant Martin Reeves, he never talked about it, but I found his service record. He was in your grandfather's company. Quinn looked up the name that evening. Found him in Tax Journal. Reeves took shrapnel today, refused evacuation, says he won't abandon his brothers. That's a Marine. Stayed 3 more days until infection got bad. Purple Heart earned 10 times over. She showed Addison the entry. The young woman cried, reading her great-grandfather's name in Tax handwriting. A connection across 72 years. Proof that these weren't just techniques. They were legacy. The final qualification was simple first-round cold bore, shot at 1,000 meters using iron sights only. Manual calculations. No electronics. 29 of 32 passed. Highest pass rate the course had seen in 20 years. Quinn stood on the range watching students celebrate. Thought about TAC, about the long road from Chosin to here, about lessons learned in blood and passed through generations. McCready walked up beside his. You did good, kid. We did good, and TAC did better. We're just carrying it forward. That's how warriors never die. We remember them, we honor them, we teach what they taught. 3 years later, Quinn made captain, ran the Aldridge Initiative full-time, trained over 600 soldiers in manual marksmanship techniques, responded to 17 instances where equipment failed and manually trained soldiers succeeded. The program was adopted by Army Rangers, Marine Raiders, and Navy SEAL sniper courses, became mandatory training, proved its worth repeatedly. But for Quinn, the real measure wasn't statistics. It was letters. From soldiers who'd made critical shots when their electronics failed, from commanders who'd stopped over-relying on technology, from veterans thanking her for remembering what their generation had taught. And one letter above all others, from Commander Thornton, retired now, living in North Carolina near his grandchildren. Quinn, wanted to tell you something. My grandson Tyler is 11. Yesterday he asked about the military, about service, about what it means. I told him about my father, about the mistake he made, about TAC Aldridge, about you, about how sometimes doing the right thing requires breaking the rules. He asked if I ever did that. I told him about the day I defied the Pentagon to defend you, about how it cost me my career but gave me peace. He said, Grandpa, that's the coolest thing you ever did. Made me realize my father died carrying regret. I'll die carrying pride, because I learned what he couldn't, that some things matter more than stars and ribbons. Thank you for teaching me that. Thank you for being worthy of your grandfather's legacy, and thank you for making sure the next generation learns what he knew. Whit Thornton. Quinn read the letter twice, then filed it with Tax Journal and the other documents that told the story. Not her story, the story of warriors across generations learning the same lessons, paying the same prices, earning the same recognition eventually when the system finally learned. She was 33 now, captain, instructor, the keeper of Tax legacy. But she didn't feel the weight of it anymore, felt the honor instead, the privilege of standing in a long line of warriors who'd done what needed doing regardless of cost. On her desk sat 3 objects: the challenge coin from Chosun, the seal trident from Sutherland, and Tax Navy Cross in its case. She looked at them every morning, reminders of what mattered: brothers, mission, duty, legacy. Her phone rang, young lieutenant from Fort Bragg. Equipment failure during night operations. Needed manual shooting solutions. Quinn talked him through the calculations, heard him make the shot, heard the relief in his voice. Captain, how did you know that would work? Because my grandfather taught me 70 years of lessons and 10 years of training. And now I'm teaching you. When you've got soldiers depending on you someday, you'll teach them. That's how this works. That's how warriors never die. She hung up, looked at Tack's photo on her desk. 22 years old in marine dress blues. Chosen reservoir, eyes that had seen hell and held the line anyway. Still teaching them grandpa, still holding the line. Outside Fort Benning echoed with gunfire, students learning, training, preparing for the day when batteries would die and skills would matter. The day that always came. The day Tack had prepared for. The day Quinn now prepared others for. Some lessons never aged. They endured, like warriors, like legacy. Like the understanding that technology changed, but fundamentals didn't. Like the knowledge that 72 years between wrongs didn't mean the wrong couldn't be righted. Like the truth that doing what needed doing, regardless of cost, defined warriors across every generation. Quinn Aldridge understood that now, lived it, taught it. And somewhere in Arlington National Cemetery, on a grave marked with a Navy Cross 72 years delayed but finally delivered, Tack Aldridge's legacy lived on. Not in medals, in warriors, in training, in the certainty that when everything failed, fundamentals didn't. That was the marksman's code, written in blood, earned in combat, passed through generations, forever.